Amanda's voice cut through the Christmas morning laughter like a blade. "You're such a useless old woman." I stood up from the dinner table, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "Then stop calling me when you need money." What she did next forced me to dial 911 within minutes. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This story gets much more intense, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But let me back up and tell you how Christmas morning turned into the day that changed everything. I'm Margaret Foster, though everyone calls me Maggie, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of family drama possible. I was wrong. The morning started perfectly. My son Brian had invited me to spend Christmas with his family, something that had become rarer over the past few years. His wife, Amanda, usually found reasons to keep these gatherings small, but this year she'd been almost enthusiastic about including me. I should have known something was up. I arrived at their beautiful suburban home in Denver at exactly 10, as requested, carrying my famous apple crisp and a bag full of carefully chosen gifts for my grandchildren, Jake, 16, and Emma, 14. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, and Christmas music played softly in the background. "Grandma Maggie?" Emma rushed to hug me, her face bright with genuine excitement. Jake, trying to maintain his teenage coolness, still managed to smile and helped carry my things inside. Amanda greeted me with what I now recognize as a performance-worthy smile. "Margaret, so glad you could make it. The kids have been asking about you all morning." Brian hugged me warmly, and for those first few hours, everything felt normal. We opened presents, the kids showed me their new video games and clothes, and I helped Amanda in the kitchen while she prepared the traditional Christmas feast. That's where things started to unravel. "Margaret," Amanda said as she pulled the turkey from the oven, "could you grab the desserts from the counter? I want to make sure everything's ready for dinner." I looked at the counter. Pumpkin pie, chocolate cake, and a store-bought apple tart. But no sign of my apple crisp. "Where did you put my crisp?" I asked, checking the other counters. Amanda's expression shifted slightly. "Oh, that! I put it in the pantry. We have so much food already. And honestly, Brian mentioned that store-bought desserts are just more convenient for cleanup." The casual dismissal stung, but I kept my voice level. "I've been making that recipe for 30 years. It's Jake's favorite." "Well, people's tastes change," Amanda said with a shrug, turning back to the turkey. I should have left it there, should have swallowed the insult and moved on. But something in her tone, the way she dismissed decades of tradition, made me push back. "Amanda, I spent 3 hours yesterday making that crisp. The least you could do is serve it." That's when her mask slipped completely. 3 hours? Amanda's voice rose sharply. 3 hours to make a dessert that nobody even asked for? This is exactly what I'm talking about, Margaret. You just assume you're welcome to contribute, assume we want your input, assume we need you here at all. The kitchen fell silent except for the bubbling of something on the stove. I could hear voices from the living room, Brian and the kids still laughing about something, completely unaware of the confrontation brewing 10 feet away. "I brought dessert because that's what family does," I said quietly. "I've been bringing dessert to family dinners for longer than you've been part of this family." Amanda's eyes flashed dangerously. "Longer than I've been part of this family? Is that supposed to mean something? Because let me tell you what I know about family. Margaret, family doesn't show up unannounced and rearrange the refrigerator. Family doesn't criticize how we parent our children. And family doesn't expect to be catered to just because they're old." Each word felt like a slap. "I've never done any of those things." "Haven't you?" Amanda moved closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "The refrigerator thing was last month, when you helped put away groceries and reorganized everything because you thought we were storing things wrong. The parenting comment was 2 weeks ago, when you suggested Jake might benefit from more structure. Should I go on?" I stared at her, realizing that every innocent gesture, every well-meaning suggestion had been cataloged and filed away as ammunition for this moment. I was trying to help. You were trying to control, just like you always do, just like you did when Brian was growing up, and just like you're doing now with my children. The constant advice, the little gifts that come with strings attached, the way you act like you know better about everything. The accusation about gifts with strings attached hit particularly hard because it was so untrue. Every present I gave came from the heart, with no expectations beyond making my family happy. What strings, Amanda? When have I ever... The money, Margaret. Her voice cut through my protest. Let's talk about the money you've been giving Brian. The little loans that you never expect to be repaid. The way you slip him cash when you think I'm not looking. Do you think that doesn't come with strings? Do you think we don't feel obligated to include you, to put up with your interference because of your generosity? I felt like she'd punched me in the stomach. I give Brian money because I love him, because I want to help. You give Brian money because it makes you feel needed. It gives you power over our decisions, over our lives. And when we don't dance to your tune fast enough, you pull out the guilt trips about how much you've sacrificed for this family. That's not true, isn't it? How many times have you reminded us that you helped with Jake's braces, that you paid for Emma's summer camp, that you covered our mortgage payment last year when Brian was between jobs? You keep a running tab in your head, don't you? I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Because while my intentions had never been manipulative, I couldn't honestly say I'd never felt hurt when my help seemed to go unnoticed or unappreciated. Amanda saw my hesitation and pounced. And see, I knew it. You do keep track, and you use it. The dinner that followed was a masterclass in family dysfunction. Amanda had composed herself before we joined the others, slipping back into her role as the perfect hostess. But I could feel the tension radiating from her every time our eyes met across the table. Brian chatted about work, oblivious to what had transpired in the kitchen. The kids talked about school and friends, their excitement about new Christmas gifts, making them more animated than usual. And I sat there mechanically eating Amanda's perfectly prepared meal, wondering how long this resentment had been building. Grandma, aren't you going to have any apple crisp? Emma asked when Amanda brought out the dessert tray. Before I could answer, Amanda jumped in smoothly. Oh, Grandma didn't bring apple crisp this year, honey, but look at this beautiful chocolate cake, your favorite. The lie was delivered so casually, so convincingly that even I almost doubted what had happened earlier. But Jake, bless him, wasn't so easily fooled. But I saw the dish in the pantry when I got more napkins, the one with the crumbly top that Grandma always makes. Amanda's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. That's just some leftovers from earlier in the week, sweetheart. Nothing special. Can we have some anyway? Jake pressed, starting to stand up. Sit down, Jake. Amanda's voice carried a sharp edge that made both kids freeze. I said we're having the desserts that are on the table. The silence that followed was thick with confusion. Brian finally cleared his throat. Everything okay, honey? Amanda's laugh was bright and brittle. Of course, just trying to keep things organized. You know how chaotic Christmas can get. But Jake wasn't ready to let it go. With the determination that only a 16-year-old can muster when they sense injustice, he looked directly at me. Grandma, did you make your apple crisp this year? The one with the oats on top? I met his eyes, then glanced at Amanda. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the warning there. This was my choice. I could play along with her version of events, let her maintain control of the narrative, or I could tell the truth and risk escalating the conflict. Yes, Jake, I made it yesterday. Then why can't we? Because, Amanda interrupted, her voice rising despite her obvious effort to control it, sometimes adults make decisions about what's appropriate for special occasions, and sometimes, she looked directly at me, people need to learn that not every tradition needs to be preserved just because it's old. The insult was subtle enough that Brian missed it entirely, but I felt it like a physical blow. Not every tradition needs to be preserved just because it's old. She wasn't just talking about the apple crisp anymore. I see, I said quietly. Good, Amanda replied, cutting herself a large piece of chocolate cake. I'm glad we understand each other. But we didn't understand each other. Not at all. Because what I was beginning to understand was that Amanda had been systematically erasing me from this family's traditions, and this Christmas dessert situation was just the latest casualty. I thought back over the past year. How many family gatherings had I been excluded from with vague excuses about keeping things small? How many times had Brian mentioned events after the fact, apologizing for the oversight of not inviting me? How often had I been told that the kids were too busy with school and activities to visit when I could see from their social media that they had plenty of time for other relatives? The realization settled in my chest like a cold weight. This wasn't about Apple Crisp. This wasn't even about today. This was about Amanda's systematic campaign to minimize my presence in their lives while still maintaining access to my financial support when convenient. After dinner, I volunteered to help clean up, hoping for a chance to speak privately with Brian, but Amanda had orchestrated the post-meal activities with military precision. Brian was sent to the garage to work on some project with Jake. Emma was dispatched upstairs to organize her new clothes, and I found myself alone in the kitchen with Amanda. Perfect. This was exactly what she'd wanted. I suppose you're proud of yourself, she said without preamble, scraping plates with more force than necessary. I'm not sure what you mean. The little scene at dinner making me look bad in front of the children? Very mature, Margaret. I set down the serving dish I'd been carrying to the sink. Amanda, I need to understand what's happening here. I feel like I'm missing something important. She turned to face me, abandoning all pretense of politeness. What you're missing is the fact that this is my family, my home, my children, and I'm tired of pretending that your constant presence and interference are welcome. Brian is my son. Brian is my husband. Those children are mine. This house is mine, and I decide who gets to be part of our family celebrations and who doesn't. The possessiveness in her voice was startling, as if Brian and the kids were objects to be owned rather than people with their own relationships and feelings. You can't just erase me from their lives because you feel threatened. Amanda laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Threatened by you, Margaret? Look at yourself. You're 67 years old. You live alone in that little apartment, and the only reason anyone pays attention to you is because you write checks. Do you really think I'm threatened by that? Each word was chosen to inflict maximum damage, and they hit their target with devastating accuracy. But something inside me rebelled against accepting this cruel assessment. If that's really how you see me, then why do you keep accepting my money? For the first time since the conversation began, Amanda looked genuinely uncomfortable. That's different. How is it different? Family helps family. You said so yourself. But I'm only family when you need something from me. Amanda turned back to the sink, her shoulders tense. You don't understand the pressure we're under. Brian's job is demanding, the mortgage is expensive, the kids have needs. When you offer to help, we accept because we have to. But that doesn't mean we have to pretend we enjoy having you hover over every decision we make. The honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. For years, I'd been telling myself that my financial contributions were appreciated, that they came from a place of love and were received with gratitude. Now I understood the truth. They were tolerated as a necessary evil, and my presence was the price Amanda paid for access to my bank account. So what do you want from me, Amanda? Do you want me to keep writing checks and stay away from family gatherings? Would that make you happy? She considered this seriously, which told me everything I needed to know. I want, she said finally, for you to stop pretending that we're all one big happy family. I want you to accept that your role in our lives is limited, and I want you to stop making Brian feel guilty every time we don't include you in something. I've never made Brian feel guilty about anything. Haven't you? What about that phone call last month when you told him how lonely you were during Emma's birthday party? What about the time you mentioned how quiet your Thanksgiving was after we decided to go to my sister's instead? You may not realize you're doing it, but you are. I stood in that kitchen, listening to Amanda's litany of my supposed crimes, and felt something shift inside me. Not sadness, not anger, but a peculiar clarity, like someone had just turned on a bright light in a room where I'd been stumbling around in the dark for years. "You're right," I said quietly. Amanda looked surprised. She'd clearly been prepared for an argument, not capitulation. "I am?" "You're absolutely right. I have been making assumptions about my place in this family. I assumed that because I love Brian and those children, that love was reciprocated in the same way. I assumed that my contributions were appreciated rather than simply tolerated. I assumed I was wanted rather than merely useful." Amanda's expression was wary now, as if she sensed the trap. "But you know what, Amanda? You've just given me the most valuable gift I could have asked for this Christmas. You've given me the truth. And now that I know where I stand, I can make some adjustments." "What kind of adjustments?" I smiled, and there must have been something unsettling about that smile, because Amanda actually took a step back. "Well, let's start with the obvious one. If my role in this family is purely financial, then we should probably treat it like the business arrangement it apparently is. No more random gifts, no more emergency loans, no more assumptions about what family owes each other." "Margaret, that's not what—" "Isn't it? You just told me that you accept my money because you have to. You told me that my presence is the price you pay for my financial help. So let's eliminate that price, shall we? From now on, if you need money, you can ask for it directly. No more family gatherings, no more pretending we all enjoy each other's company. Just business." Amanda's face had gone pale. "You're being ridiculous. I never said—" "You said exactly that, Amanda. You told me I don't understand the pressure you're under, that you accept my help because you have to. Well, now you won't have to anymore. You can find other ways to manage your pressure." The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupted our conversation. Brian appeared in the doorway, Jake right behind him. "How are my favorite ladies doing?" Brian asked with forced cheer. He could obviously sense the tension, even if he didn't understand its source. "Just having a nice chat," Amanda said quickly, "about holiday traditions and changes." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and supported for 42 years, and wondered when he'd become so adept at avoiding uncomfortable truths. When had he learned to accept Amanda's version of reality without question? When had he stopped being curious about my feelings or well-being? "Dad," Jake said suddenly, "Mom won't let us have Grandma's apple crisp. It's in the pantry, but she says we can't eat it." Brian looked confused. "Apple crisp? Mom, did you bring apple crisp?" "She did," Jake pressed on with teenage persistence, "but Mom said it wasn't appropriate for Christmas dinner." I watched Brian's face as he processed this information. I could see him trying to figure out how to navigate between his wife's wishes and his confusion about why apple crisp would be inappropriate for any family meal. "Well, maybe we can have it later, as a midnight snack or something." It was a diplomatic answer, but it revealed everything about the dynamic in this house. Amanda made the decisions, and Brian found ways to work around them without direct confrontation. "Actually," I said, reaching for my purse, "I think I should head home. It's been a long day, and I'm feeling a bit tired." The protests were immediate and predictable. Brian insisted it was too early for me to leave. The kids wanted to show me more of their presence, and even Amanda made token objections about staying for coffee and more dessert. But I could see the relief in Amanda's eyes. She'd gotten what she wanted, a clear understanding between us about the nature of our relationship going forward. No, I really should go," I said, accepting hugs from Jake and Emma. "Thank you for a lovely Christmas dinner." Brian walked me to the door, carrying my coat and the untouched dish of apple crisp. "Mom, is everything okay? You seem different." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the warm, beautifully decorated house where I'd just learned I was no longer truly welcome. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about some changes I might need to make in the new year." "What kind of changes?" "Oh, nothing dramatic. Just reassessing some things. Priorities. Brian's expression was concerned, but not alarmed. After all, his 67-year-old mother talking about reassessing priorities probably seemed like normal aging behavior, not the beginning of a complete restructuring of our relationship. If you need anything, you can call, right? Of course, I agreed, though we both knew that calling had become increasingly pointless over the past few years. My calls were answered with polite conversation and quick excuses to end the chat. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through neighborhoods decorated with Christmas lights and inflatable lawn ornaments. Families were visible through lit windows, gathered around dinner tables and Christmas trees. And I wondered how many of those scenes were as dysfunctional as the one I just left. Back in my small apartment, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and began making a list. Not a to-do list or a grocery list, but an accounting of sorts. Every loan I'd made to Brian and Amanda over the past 5 years, every emergency payment, every temporary help with bills, every gift that had been substantial enough to impact my own budget. The total was staggering. More than I'd realized, certainly more than I could afford to continue if I wanted to maintain my own financial security in retirement. But the money wasn't really the issue. Money could be earned back, budgets could be adjusted, and at my age, I didn't need much to be comfortable. The real issue was dignity, self-respect, the ability to look at myself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. For too long, I'd been buying tolerance by calling it love. I'd been accepting scraps of attention and calling it family closeness. I'd been enabling Amanda's control and calling it keeping the peace. That ended today. My phone rang as I was finishing my calculations. Brian's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my stomach clench. No doubt Amanda had sent him to smooth things over, to make sure my feelings weren't too hurt, to ensure that the financial pipeline wouldn't be disrupted. I let it go to voicemail, but when it rang again immediately, and then a third time, I finally answered. Mom, thank God. Listen, there's been a situation here. Amanda, she's called the police. My blood went cold. What happened? She says you threatened her, says you made statements about cutting off contact with the family and that she feels unsafe. The officers are here now and they want to speak with you. The world tilted sideways. After everything that had happened today, after all the cruel words and calculated humiliations, Amanda was playing victim, and she was using the police to do it. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my own living room answering questions from Officer Patricia Wells, a nonsense woman in her 40s who looked like she'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable. Mrs. Foster, your daughter-in-law claims you made threatening statements about cutting off all contact with the family, and that your behavior today was erratic and concerning. Can you tell me your version of what happened? I almost laughed. After years of Amanda's manipulation, she'd finally overplayed her hand. Because there's one thing about being 67 years old with a clean record. Police officers tend to listen when you speak calmly and rationally. Officer Wells, Amanda told me today that my role in the family is purely financial. She explained that they tolerate my presence because I help with their expenses, but that they don't actually enjoy having me around. When I said I understood and would adjust my expectations accordingly, she apparently interpreted that as a threat. Officer Wells made notes. What kind of financial help are we talking about? I pulled out the list I'd been making when Brian called. Over the past 5 years, I've provided approximately $43,000 in loans and gifts, mortgage payments, car repairs, children's expenses, none of which I've ever asked to be repaid. The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. That's substantial. And you never expected repayment. I'm a mother, Officer Wells. I help my family because I love them. Or at least, that's what I thought I was doing. Today I learned I was actually paying for the privilege of being treated poorly. Officer Wells studied me for a long moment. Mrs. Foster, I need to ask directly. Did you make any statements that could be interpreted as threats? I told Amanda that if our relationship was purely financial, we should treat it as such. No more family gatherings where I'm barely tolerated. No more pretending we all enjoy each other's company. If they need money, they can ask directly, but I won't continue subsidizing people who clearly resent my presence. That doesn't sound like a threat to me. It wouldn't be to a reasonable person, but Amanda isn't reasonable. She's been systematically isolating me from my son and grandchildren while maintaining access to my bank account. Today, when I finally understood what was happening and said I wouldn't continue enabling it, she panicked. Officer Wells closed her notebook. Mrs. Foster, I'm not seeing any evidence of threatening behavior here. It sounds like a family disagreement about boundaries and financial arrangements. However, I do need to document this call for the record. By calling the police, she'd forced this conflict into the open, where it could be examined objectively, and under objective examination, her position looked exactly like what it was: manipulative, cruel, and unsustainable. My phone buzzed with a text from Brian. Mom? I'm sorry about the police thing. Amanda was upset and overreacted. Can we talk tomorrow and sort this out? I stared at that message for a long time. Even now, even after everything that had happened, Brian was framing this as Amanda being upset rather than deliberately malicious. He was suggesting we sort this out as if I were equally responsible for the conflict. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching something that had been nagging at the back of my mind all evening. Amanda Mitchell, now Amanda Foster, had been remarkably vague about her life before meeting Brian. I'd always attributed this to the normal privacy of a woman who'd had relationships before marriage. But sitting at my computer that night, I realized I knew almost nothing concrete about my daughter-in-law's background. Where had she gone to college? What was her maiden name? Where had she worked before becoming a stay-at-home mother? Basic questions that after 8 years of family membership, I couldn't answer. Brian had met her at a Denver coffee shop where she'd been working as a manager. That much I knew. But when I searched for Denver coffee shops that might have employed someone named Amanda Mitchell around 2015, I hit dead ends. Either the shops had closed, been renamed, or their employee records weren't publicly accessible. What I could find, however, were court records. 3 Amanda Mitchells in the Denver area had been involved in civil litigation between 2010 and 2015. 2 were clearly different people. Wrong ages, wrong physical descriptions based on case documents. But the third, Amanda J. Mitchell, aged 28 in 2014, had been sued by a former employer for embezzlement. The case had been settled out of court, records sealed, but the initial filing was still accessible. She'd been accused of systematically stealing from client accounts over an 8-month period, using her position as office manager to cover her tracks. The timeline fit perfectly. The case was settled in early 2015. Brian met Amanda in late 2015. A woman with a sealed embezzlement case on her record might well need to reinvent herself, find a stable man with family money, and create a new life built on someone else's financial foundation. I sat back in my chair, pieces clicking into place. Amanda's insistence on managing all the household finances, her detailed knowledge of our family's financial situation, information that had to come from Brian, but which she wielded with surprising precision. Her systematic isolation of me from family activities while maintaining access to my financial support. This wasn't just about a daughter-in-law who didn't like her mother-in-law. This was about a woman with a history of financial manipulation who'd found the perfect setup. A generous husband with a wealthy mother, both too trusting to ask hard questions about her past. But I needed more evidence before I could act on these suspicions, and I needed to understand exactly how deep Amanda's manipulation went. The next morning, I called my bank and requested copies of all checks I'd written to Brian or Amanda over the past 5 years. Then I called my financial advisor and asked him to walk through my account activity, particularly any large withdrawals that might have been made to help my family. What I learned made my blood run cold. According to my records, I'd been far more generous than even I had realized. The $43,000 I'd calculated was just the direct payments. There had been numerous other transactions. Gift cards purchased for the grandchildren but delivered to Amanda, deposits made directly into their account during financial emergencies, even payments made to vendors for home repairs and improvements. The total was over $67,000 in 5 years. But here's what really caught my attention. Several of the emergency payments had been requested during months when Brian's salary should have been more than adequate to cover their expenses, unless their spending was completely out of control, or unless someone was siphoning money from their household budget. I thought about Amanda's designer handbags, her frequent spa days, her expensive yoga classes that she mentioned in social media posts. I thought about how she always seemed to have money for her personal interests while claiming they were struggling with basic household expenses. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Brian's neighborhood and parked across from their house. Not to spy exactly, but to observe, to see if my new perspective on Amanda's character would reveal things I'd missed before. What I saw was illuminating. At 2:30, a delivery truck arrived. Not a standard package delivery, but a furniture truck from an expensive boutique store downtown. Two men unloaded what appeared to be a dining room set, table, chairs, and a sideboard that looked like it cost more than most people's cars. 30 minutes later, Amanda's car pulled into the driveway. She got out carrying shopping bags from Nordstrom, Anthropologie, and several other upscale retailers. This was a Tuesday afternoon in late December, right after Christmas, and she was on a major shopping spree. I remembered the conversation from yesterday, how Amanda had mentioned the pressure they were under, the expensive mortgage, Brian's demanding job, how they had to accept my financial help because of their circumstances. Yet here she was, spending what looked like thousands of dollars on furniture and clothes less than 24 hours after playing the victim to police officers about our family disagreement. My phone rang. Brian's name appeared on the screen, and this time I answered. "Mom? I'm glad you picked up. We need to talk about what happened yesterday. Amanda's really upset, and I think there are some misunderstandings we need to clear up." "Brian, where are you right now?" "At work." "Why?" "Just curious. Is Amanda home today?" "Yeah, she had the day off. She was going to catch up on some errands and maybe do some after-Christmas shopping. The kids are at friends' houses, so she has some time to herself." After Christmas shopping with what money, I wondered? The money they didn't have because of their financial pressure and expensive lifestyle? "Brian, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. How much money do you think I've given your family over the past 5 years?" There was a long pause. "I don't know, Mom. We've never kept a running total. You've been generous, but $67,000? Brian, the silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. That can't be right. I have bank records, canceled checks, and transaction histories. $67,000 in loans, gifts, emergency payments, and direct expenses I've covered for your family. Mom, even if that number is accurate, you've never made us feel obligated, haven't I? According to Amanda, that money comes with strings attached. According to her, you both feel obligated to include me in family activities because of my financial contributions. She told me yesterday that you accept my help because you have to, not because you want to." Another long silence. "She said that. She said a lot of things, Brian, but what concerns me most is that she asked you to call me today to sort this out, not because she feels bad about how she treated me, but because she's worried I might stop writing checks. That's not, Mom, you're making this sound more calculated than it is." "Am I? Tell me something, Brian. When was the last time Amanda suggested including me in a family activity? Not when you suggested it, but when she initiated the invitation." I could hear him thinking, searching his memory for an example that would prove me wrong. Well, yesterday, Christmas dinner was her idea. And how did that work out? That evening, I received a phone call that changed everything. The caller identified herself as Detective Sarah Reeves from the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. "Mrs. Foster, I understand you've been researching someone named Amanda Mitchell. Can I ask why you're interested in her?" My heart stopped. Who is this really? Ma'am, I'm a detective with Denver PD. Your internet searches triggered some alerts in our system. Amanda Mitchell is a person of interest in an ongoing investigation, and we'd like to speak to you about your connection to her. The world tilted sideways. She's my daughter-in-law. Amanda Foster now. She married my son. When did this marriage take place? 2016. They've been married about 8 years. Mrs. Foster, would you be willing to come to the station tomorrow morning? There are some things you need to know about Amanda Mitchell, and there are some things we need to know about your relationship with her. I barely slept that night. Every interaction with Amanda over the past 8 years replayed in my mind, viewed through the lens of what I was beginning to suspect, that she was not just manipulative, but professionally criminal. At 9 a.m. sharp, I was sitting in Detective Reeves' office, looking at a file folder with Amanda's photo clipped to the front. Mrs. Foster, Amanda Mitchell has been using multiple identities for at least 10 years. The embezzlement case you found online was just the beginning. She's been married twice before under different names, and in both cases, she systematically drained her husband's finances before disappearing. I felt sick. What about my son? What about the children? The children appear to be legitimately his based on our investigation, but Amanda Mitchell, or Amanda Foster as she's known now, has been running a long-term con on your family. She's been using your financial support to fund a lifestyle that includes a secret apartment, a second car registered under a different name, and what appears to be preparation for another disappearance. Another disappearance? Detective Reeves opened the file and showed me surveillance photos. Amanda at a bank I didn't recognize, Amanda meeting with a man I'd never seen, Amanda loading boxes into a storage unit. We believe she's been planning to leave your son for several months. The pattern is always the same. She establishes herself with a financially stable family, extracts as much money as possible, and then vanishes with whatever assets she can liquidate. But the children! In her previous marriages, she left behind the children. They weren't biologically hers in those cases, but she'd been their stepmother for years. She has no problem abandoning children when it suits her purposes. I stared at the photos, thinking about Jake and Emma, about how devastated they would be if Amanda simply vanished from their lives. But then I thought about something else. Detective, if you know all this, why haven't you arrested her? We've been building a case, but we needed more evidence of active fraud. Your research yesterday, combined with the information you can provide about the money she's taken from your family, gives us what we need to move forward. What do you want me to do? Detective Reeves leaned forward. Mrs. Foster, we want you to help us catch her in the act. The plan was elegantly simple. I would approach Amanda with an offer she couldn't resist, a substantial early inheritance that I wanted to give to the family for tax purposes. The amount would be large enough to trigger her greed, but would be structured in a way that would require her to reveal her hidden accounts and financial preparations. It took 3 days to set everything up. During that time, I had to act normally, taking Brian's calls and pretending nothing had changed. The hardest part was not warning him about what was coming. Detective Reeves had insisted that for the operation to work, Brian couldn't know what we were planning. On Friday morning, I called Amanda directly. Amanda, I'd like to speak with you about something important. Could you meet me for coffee this afternoon? She sounded surprised, but agreed. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in downtown Denver, where Detective Reeves and her team could monitor our conversation. Amanda, I've been thinking about our conversation on Christmas Day, and you were right about several things. I have been too involved in your family's business, and I haven't been respectful of your boundaries. She looked suspicious, but nodded. I appreciate you saying that, Margaret. I want to make amends. And I want to do something that will benefit your family's future without requiring my ongoing involvement. I pulled out a folder prepared by the detective team. I'm prepared to give Brian and the children a substantial gift, $200,000, but I want to do it in a way that minimizes tax implications. Amanda's eyes lit up, but she tried to hide her excitement. That's very generous. There are some complications with transferring that much money, particularly since some of it would need to go into accounts that aren't jointly held. I'll need information about all your family's accounts, including any personal accounts you might have for managing household expenses. This was the moment. If Amanda was legitimate, she'd suggest involving Brian in these discussions. If she was running a con, she'd try to handle this herself to maintain control. I can provide that information, she said quickly. Brian's so busy with work, and honestly, I handle all our financial planning anyway. It would be easier if we could just work directly together on this. Perfect. I'll need account numbers, routing information, and verification of balances for tax documentation purposes. Over the next 20 minutes, Amanda provided details about not just their joint accounts, but 3 additional accounts I'd never heard of. She also mentioned investment accounts and a business account for a consulting company I didn't know she owned. What she didn't know was that our entire conversation was being recorded and that Detective Reeves was watching from a table across the cafe. There's just one more thing, Amanda. The transfer will need to happen quickly, within the next few days, to meet the tax deadline. Can you make sure all these accounts are ready to receive funds? Absolutely. Margaret, I want you to know, I think we got off on the wrong foot at Christmas. This is exactly the kind of fresh start our family needs. As I walked to my car after the meeting, Detective Reeves called me. Mrs. Foster, we got everything we needed. 3 of those accounts she mentioned are under false names, and one of them has been receiving regular transfers from your family's joint account. We'll be making arrest tomorrow morning. The next morning, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Brian, his voice shaky and confused. Mom, Amanda's been arrested. They're saying she's wanted for fraud in 3 states. They're saying she's not even who we thought she was. That afternoon, sitting in my quiet apartment with a cup of tea and my apple crisp, finally served at the right temperature, I reflected on how completely my life had changed in 1 week. Amanda was in custody, facing charges that would likely keep her away from any family for a very long time. Brian was devastated, but beginning to understand the scope of how he'd been manipulated. The children were confused, but safe, and slowly learning that their grandmother had helped protect them from something they were too young to fully understand. Most importantly, I had my dignity back. I'd stopped being a victim and started being someone who refused to accept unacceptable treatment. At 67 years old, I'd learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to be anyone's victim ever again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.